Welcome to episode number 22 of the Marine Layer podcast with TJ Mathewson and Lyle Goldstein. On today's pod, we're joined by Jason Churchill, a Prospect Insider and the host of Baseball Things. We sat down with Jason and had a long conversation. We talked about a lot of things: baseball, Mariners, ballparks, broadcasters, whole lot of stuff in this conversation with Jason Churchill. He's awesome. He makes great content around the Mariners with his podcast, Baseball Things. And we're so happy that he could join us here on the Marine Layer podcast to talk about a lot of things. It was a long conversation, so the only other thing we'll have in this episode is Speak Your Mind, which we will close out the show with. With that, let's get it rolling. And we welcome you into this episode of the Marine Layer podcast, recording here on Monday, March 27th. By the time you're listening to this, it will be Wednesday the 29th, and opening day will be tomorrow. I'm happy. It should be a holiday. It should be a federal holiday. I should be off of work on that day.
Day after the Super Bowl and opening day in Major League Baseball. No work, no school, national holiday. Also, here in Seattle, it's going to be sunny. How often in late March, early April is it sunny for opening day?
Yeah, it's like 34 degrees outside right now, so I don't want to hear it. Pouring rain. I mean, I don't want to hear it. Thanks. It was 60 last week. Briefly, before it got down to like 25. So
I guess this is how my brain works, that because we're both in the Pacific Northwest, even though you're about 4 hours away from the Seattle area, just in my brain, I'm like, oh, well, it's sunny here, so it's probably sunny in Corvallis, and it's not, is it?
I always try to I always think the weather's the same, like you said, but it is it's a little farther apart. So I'm looking forward to that. I mean, it's not even just the Mariners, the fact that we get a full day of baseball. And I'm excited because we'll just have more to talk about. Funny enough, the episode we record next week will be the first episode we will have recorded with actual baseball being played. Not just Mariners. I mean, in general, which we of course want to talk about the Mariners. The podcast is centered around the fact that we are Mariner fans. But hey, there's a lot of other interesting stuff that happens across this league that, we want to talk about as well. So I'm really looking forward to that. There's not more of a we're back moment. We'll have to brainstorm where exactly we're putting this into our episodes, Lyle, because we've talked about this. But we do have our first umpire of the week. That the guy came out today here on Monday. My goodness, I've never. In the Phillies spring training game today, I've never seen someone got tossed for something so small. So JT Realmuto is catching, and he puts his glove back like this. Oh, so if you're listening to this on the podcast, his right hand or his left hand is back over his shoulder with his glove extended for the umpire to put a ball in it. And he sees the umpire threw it back to the pitcher. So he takes his glove down and he puts it back in his lap. And the umpire, about to put it in there, accidentally throws the ball on the ground, gets pissed off, and tosses JT out of the game for taking his glove down. Go look up the video on Twitter if you can even find it. Speaking of messes, Twitter's another one recently. But regardless, it's one of the funniest videos ever. I got a great cackle looking at that today.
Let's give people a teaser here. When the regular season starts, so the next show that we do, part of what we're going to do during these regular season shows, we'll have a few segments, but one of them is going to be highlighting an umpire that has just been insufferable and miserable to watch throughout a single game or the week. We have a special name for it too. I mean, right up TJ and I's alley, right up Seattle fans' alley. We're going to leave you with that as the teaser, and we'll spoil what the name is next week when the segment actually starts. But if you are somebody that likes to hear umpire slander, come right to this podcast because we will not shy away.
The thing I don't like, and this can go right back to my beef with Twitter. So we're not going to get umpire scorecards this year. I don't believe. Not on Twitter. Not easily available.
We're not?
I don't think so because automated accounts cost money. Right?
Yeah, you're right.
Right. So I guess we'll find out on Thursday. I am pretty certain that the umpire scorecards might not be available. I could be wrong. There is a website with umpire scorecards that you can go look at. Right. So that's not going anywhere. Just the fact that there is a Twitter account pushing it out. This is not confirmed information. I'm not an MLB insider on these sort of topics. but I know some of these automated accounts, which it's a real shame they're going away because I find them extremely helpful for keeping up with things in a full day of baseball. So we'll look out for that on Thursday. I do love a good scorecard though. I can't wait for our first 85%er of the year. It's gonna be a mix. It's not just gonna be ejections. It's just not just gonna be something an umpire said. We're gonna mix in some scorecards too. It's like, man, dude, I mean, you are a professional and you're hitting at like 85% in the strikes. I mean, this just can't happen. I mean, it could be a whole number of things. And I'm looking forward to the creative ways we'll dig one up.
If we were just going to do umpire scorecards, we could do CB Buckner every week. I mean, that guy's got to be in the 85th percentile just about every game he's behind the plate. It's ridiculous. But anyway, we're looking forward to that. We're certainly looking forward to Mariners baseball, to baseball in general being back. I think we have a pretty good podcast here this week to set everybody up for opening day because our interview with Jason Churchill, it's about an hour and 20 minutes, but Jason Churchill is awesome. I mean, TJ and I have followed him for years. I said it to him during the interview. He is one of the smartest Mariners people you will find. I mean, he knows his stuff so well. He does his research. He's in depth. He knows what he's talking about. And you can tell from us talking with him in the interview that he really dives deep into this stuff and really has his information. He's really on top of his information. So it's pretty cool. And we cover a lot of topics too, not just Mariners. It's a very easy flowing conversation. I enjoyed it a bunch. I mean, I know we say this every week. It was one of my favorites.
It is always great to it's when we get an interview that's not really formal, right? Mm-hmm. Formal interviews get a little painful at times. I mean, it gets a little stacked, a little stiff, but Churchill, it's a great conversation. So don't want to rob you any more time of waiting to listen to that.
Yeah, let's not do that. Also, 10 seconds here. Side note, if you are a member of Payroll Twitter, this episode may not be for you, or maybe it is. See what Jason Churchill and the two of us had to say about Payroll Twitter. So let's not delay it any longer. Let's get to our interview with Jason Churchill. We welcome Jason Churchill onto the Marine Layer podcast. Jason's the host of the Baseball Things podcast, and genuinely, he is one of the smartest Mariners people you will find. Jason, thanks so much for coming on the show. This is really awesome. We really appreciate you joining us.
Hey, no problem, guys. Checks in the mail for that. I appreciate that. I feed off of people like you guys. You guys that you're wearing the Mariners gear and you watch this team religiously. I told a lot of people last year that the reason why it was fun wasn't because the team was good. It was because of everybody's engagement in it, the buzz that you hear. That was a lot of fun, and you guys are certainly part of that.
Do you choose to respond to certain people versus other people on Twitter? Because I know you're talking about the fan engagement. And I know, like any fan base, on Twitter, it can be a bit of a cesspool, and we certainly see it in the Mariners world. So do you kind of pick your spots as like, okay, I think this guy just made a good point, or are you like, I'll respond to anybody?
I'm usually the other way. It's a really good question. I'm usually the other way because I'm kind of a glutton for punishment a little bit. When someone says something pretty stupid, that you're generally more likely to get something from me if you're just the complete idiot in the room. Mm-hmm. But it sounds like you think you're onto something. Those are the ones I kind of seek out a little bit. It's like, this guy needs his head flipped around. Seriously though, it's kind of random. I'm trying to actually use Twitter less, and I think by opening day my Twitter commenting days will be to a minimum. It's time consuming. So in terms of picking and choosing what you spend your time on social media, yeah, for me, it's just going to be I'll use it as a marketing tool because genuinely that's its value to me, and I'll keep the conversations in the right spots. But that's the battle, right? Like, we're all out on social media. We experience things with each other, even if we're not sitting next to them at the stadium or at the ballpark. We experience it with social media, in large part. And it was really cool to see last year with the Mariners breaking through and the excitement that built up and how nervous everybody was and how elated everybody was when Cal hits the homer and all that good stuff. And in the Toronto series, that was obviously great as well. But yeah, picking and choosing is not necessarily my specialty, because I'll seek out the ones to rip instead of the ones where it might require, something positive. So I think instead of saying, hey, Church, just be more positive, I'm just going to refrain from commenting a whole lot. I think that's a little bit of an easier path for me.
When you spend less time on Twitter, is there anyone you're going to miss?
No. Oh, good question. Absolutely not. And you know, some folks are asking me why I'm doing this. Is like there's value to Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and things like that, but there's not a lot of value in creating Twitter threads, and there's not a lot of value in your followers unless it becomes transactional in some way. And when you do a podcast or have content that's behind a paywall, you certainly use social media, need social media to some extent for that purpose. But beyond that, it's just it's one of those rabbit holes that you just really don't want to fall down, but it's really difficult to avoid sometimes because you're interested in the topic. We're interested in baseball. We're interested in the Mariners. We're interested in football or whatever it is. Politics sometimes is the worst hole to go down on social media. So for me, it's just I'm trying to get away from it and spend my time creating more content, doing more podcasts, or having conversations with the subscribers in the Baseball Thing Slack channel, things of that nature. So less social media, more direct, kind of have conversations with actual people that subscribe to the show or that I know in real life. Maybe Church go out and have a social life for once, in a blue moon, and that's kind of part of it as well.
Talking with your subscribers on Prospects Insider, which you founded in 2006. So if you want to go find Jason and others' work there, prospectsinsider.com, also the host of the Baseball Things podcast. That's something you launched back in 2006. I don't know if it was necessarily ahead of its time, but I was reading the feature piece on Barrett Sports Media on you earlier today, and I didn't realize, Jason, before all of this happened, you were like a message board guy?
Yeah, so... It's kind of a funny story. So back before a lot of this even existed, when blogs were just starting to kind of become a thing, like 2001, 2002, 2003, like most people didn't really know what a blog was. There were message boards out there. There was one in particular called baseballboards.com. And I found it and I thought it was interesting and I'd interact with a few people, and a guy by the name, I'm just going to go ahead and name drop, a guy by the name of Joe Kaiser is one of my best friends to this day. Contacted me on there and said, hey, I'm running the Mariners version of dogman.com on the same network, which at the time was called The Insiders. And then Fox ended up buying it, and now it's Dogman is at 247 Sports with the CBS brand. So that's kind of where I learned how to write. That's where I learned how to communicate baseball. That's where I got my opportunities in baseball, and that's how it started. But yeah, it started on a message board. That's where Joe Kaiser kind of found me and says, hey, you seem to really like this stuff. You want to come over and help me build something over here? And that turned into InsideThePark.com. And then a couple of years later, I was like, I'm just going to start my own thing and focus on the minor leagues and the prospects, and that's where Prospect Insider came from.
So it sounds like when you were a commenter, you tried to provide insightful, well thought out remarks and thoughts as opposed to no. Are you going to say you were more
I think to be honest with you, I was just like anybody else. I was a fan of the game. I was interested in the Mariners. I was interested in the farm system, and I had an opportunity to go through at the time, which was like a bird dog school for scouts years back in Florida. And it doesn't exist anymore. Man, it's been gone for a long time. So I got to learn a lot there, and I thought I had some insight on some things. And to some extent I did that maybe others didn't, that they didn't have experience in. But what I wasn't good at then was conveying the point. And you learn that as time goes by. As a radio guy or a podcast guy or a writer or even on social media, you learn what resonates with people and what's effective and what's not. Back in the message board days, it was just like, no, that's BS. That's not what's going on here. And then you really don't know how to explain yourself, right? So that was the very early days of trying to be able to convey the point or actually provide legitimate insider analysis. Because if you don't explain it to people and they don't see it, it's just anecdotal. It's subjective. And at the end of the day, people really aren't going to care. You're not Pat Gillick. You're not Jerry DiPoto. You're not Brian Cashman. You know what I mean? You're not King Scout. Show. And that's about that time is when we started to see the birth of what I like to consider today the voice type of content that we see out there, where someone might go out and like Travis Sawchik is really good at this, Keith Law is really good at this, some of the folks at Fangraphs are really good at this. Like, it's not just, hey, I went and saw this player and here's what I thought. It's, hey, I've been watching this player just like everybody else. Here's why I think he's struggling. Here's why I think he's succeeding, and you're using data to back it up. And the more data that becomes available to us, the more interesting that gets, and the tighter the conclusion is, right? We didn't have that back then, so it was very subjective and very anecdotal, and so you're not winning a lot of arguments because you can't show your work. It's like, well, I know more than you. That doesn't work, right? Like, you guys can't walk around. I can't walk around and just say, hey, I know more than you. Like, that doesn't work, right? You have to do the work and build a reputation, or show your work, show your data, show evidence. That's a struggle, and even in my day job these days, it's a little bit of a struggle to convey to writers, hey, if you want to be some sort of a voice, some sort of an authority on this, like, show the work. And then eventually, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, people are going to be like, well, I mean, it's TJ Mathewson or it's Lyle Goldstein. They know what they're doing. Like, then you have a name in that realm. I'm still trying to get there, to be honest with you, in that way, at least. Some people look to me for content, but in terms of opinion, to come to a conclusion, I'll get there maybe when I'm 80, maybe 90.
So what I'm taking from that is you learn to be a little more insightful than the group of Mariners Twitter people who call themselves payroll Twitter.
Oh, good Lord. Oh boy. Yeah. So I gotta be honest. I ignore it because it's not content. It's just whining. Even though I agree, yeah, John Stanton should spend more money on his baseball team, but doesn't it really end right there? Like, there's no argument against it, right? There's no argument that they shouldn't in general spend more money on the team. So now we're just arguing semantics. How should they spend it? How many players should they spend it on? Which particular players should they spend it? Well, that's Jerry DiPoto's job. And I guess payroll Twitter, as you put it, which is it's a great phrase. They're basically suggesting they know how to build a baseball team better than Jerry DiPoto. I mean, do we really think, by the way, as Mariners fans, as Mariners observers, that Jerry DiPoto has spent every penny that's available to him for this year? Do we really think that? I mean, we shouldn't, right?
Probably
like, there's
not.
always a contingency plan. There's always looking ahead, right? So was this really John Stanton being cheap, at least to this level? Or was this Jerry DiPoto and Justin Hollander saying, well, we have a different plan. Let's do this differently. We're not necessarily going to add a $40 million player. We're not going to add, $100 million in payroll in one offseason. That seems to be what payroll Twitter wanted and thinks should have happened. So, yeah, that's payroll Twitter's a funny thing to me.
Yeah, just to kind of bounce off that idea, I'm kind of in the same boat as you, that if the Mariners take the approach of how the Braves modeled themselves, how the Astros modeled themselves, like, those teams still spent a lot of money. But for example, like, if it was up to payroll Twitter, they would have given Trevor Story all the money in the world. Well, Trevor Story didn't have a great year last year. Now he's injured. I think people would be having buyer's remorse all of a sudden these days if they had made that signing. And they were close to signing him too.
Yeah, they were. From what I'm told, they had the largest offer or were willing to make the largest offer to Trevor Story last year, and it didn't happen. And now we're probably sitting around thinking, it's probably a good thing they didn't do that, because if they did, would they have been able to go out under the parameters that Jerry DiPoto and Justin Hollander want to work, under the payroll budget that they've been given? Would Castillo have an extension right now? What would Julio Rodriguez's extension look like? Would it look different? Would it have taken longer to get done? Would it have been shorter? Would it have been longer? Like, things change, when you're trying to plan things out. So that's the thing to me about, fans that want to go out and make baseball decisions. Like, the general idea, again, going back to the top of the conversation, the general idea that owners, including John Stanton and the Seattle Mariners, should spend more money than they do on their product, and somewhat significantly, is 100% true. I don't think there's any argument against it. How they do it and who they spend it on, well, that's up to the experts. I'm not an expert. Are you guys experts on that? You might be, but if you're not, then maybe whining about it probably isn't the right way to go. So that's why we don't hear some people whining about it, and some people are whining about it.
I think you can count me as a guilty party of whining, just a little bit.
But
not
are you
totally.
whining about the general idea of them not spending, or are you like, oh my gosh, they're idiots for not giving Carlos Correa $250 million? Like, there's a difference between those two things.
I was more to the point when it got down to 6 years of what I don't understand how I don't know if they made an offer or not. I don't know how you don't when it gets down that low. In that case, when it actually becomes reasonable and not 13 years that got paying a guy into his age 42 season.
It's a fair question to ask. And I don't have any inside information on the Carlos Correa situation, but when two clubs back out of larger deals, you have to start wondering what is actually going on in those exams, right? Like what is it that teams are finding that they don't like so much? So that might actually explain why Seattle didn't really want to engage, because maybe if it was going to take 6 years at the start, maybe they would have engaged, right? And then maybe learned later on, hey, we don't necessarily like the physical results. But if the Mets are saying, well, we don't really love this and we want to do something different after agreeing to a deal with them, then I'm going to buy that something in there is legitimate that's going to scare some teams away. If the Mets can be scared away, then who can't? Like the Mariners would have been scared away too. That's the way I'm kind of looking at this because of the way the Mets have been spending the last year or so. So I get that, and that's fair, to ask at what point don't you jump in? At what point did Dansby Swanson not make sense for you, whether it be at second base or shortstop? To me, the ones are, from a baseball standpoint, not a spending standpoint, are Michael Conforto and essentially any mid-rotation pitcher, including Taijuan Walker and Jameson Taillon. Like those guys, to me, would have fit in kind of how I'm looking at the budget moving forward, especially Conforto, to be honest with you. Not a lot of guaranteed money. The upside is an above average to plus bat that you can, and right now, like what position are we talking about with the Mariners right now more than anything? The designated hitter spot. Even though we know there's going to be a rotation, we also know that that's going to be done with outfielders. So Michael Conforto would have fit in. They're lopsided right-handed to left-handed. There's just so many things about that were perfect. But again, I'm willing to give the club the benefit of the doubt because there's an injury history there. That's certainly not my area of expertise at all. So it's really tough. And sometimes people look at me and say, you're just somebody called me the other day. What did they call me on Twitter? Some sort of a Stanton apologist, even though I'm, sitting here saying, yeah, they should spend more money, but whining about it doesn't make you not a Stanton apologist or a Stanton apologist if you're not whining about it. It's just, hey, I'm not going to tell them exactly how to spend their money. So that's a tough one when injuries are involved in that, but that's fair. Did you guys feel the same way about the Trey Turner when Trey Turner was offered more money by the Padres and the Dodgers, I'm hearing, and turned it down to go to Philadelphia? Did you guys think, why didn't Seattle get involved in that? Or did you actually make this kind of analysis in your head and saying, I get that 10, 11, 12 years, same thing with Xander Bogaerts, for $25, $30, $35 million, paying these guys beyond age 35. I get that that's a little bit of a problem. Did you kind of think that way, or were you like, no, they should have done it?
So I think TJ and I, this is why I think our dynamic on this podcast is good, because I'd like to think we both know what we're talking about, but our views can be a little bit different sometimes. Mm-hmm. At least mine was, yeah, that's way too long to be given a guy a contract for. Even a player as good as Trey Turner, who I think since 2019 is second in baseball in F4. Mm-hmm. Like at 40 years old, even at 36, 37, 38, 39 years old, you're not going to be getting any bang for your buck. And that's how those contracts go. But I actually prefer the way DePoto has kind of managed his way in his time as the GM and now president of baseball ops, where, yeah, he doesn't want to give out another Robinson Cano contract. He's trying to keep a flexible payroll while still giving him opportunities to spend money elsewhere. So yeah, when Turner got that deal, especially knowing that usually how it goes with Seattle is they have to overpay to get any free agent, I was like, yeah, I think I'm good.
It didn't take too long into free agency to sort of figure out that Trey Turner was not happening. I don't think, I mean, just think about it rationally. Dude's from Florida. Every indication, every rumor that came out the entire offseason was East Coast, East Coast, East Coast, East Coast. And Padres offer Mets level money for pretty much everything now. They're that committed to it. So when he's turning down $30 more million, it's like, no. It's just
so
like that. In that case,
this. Like TJ, it sounds like you were on this whole, you're going to have to overpay to do it, like overpay even with the market. And it sounds like even, Lyle, if the Mariners could have given Trey Turner what the Phillies gave him, you'd still probably be like, well, maybe not. Maybe that's not a good idea. So there's a limit. You got there in a different way, but there's a limit, right? See, I look at it this way. Like my limit might be different because it is. It's probably a little different than both of yours. But why is payroll Twitter's limit more accurate than Jerry DePoto's limit? That's usually where I end the conversation. So you're saying you have this figured out more than John Stanton, more than Jerry Dipoto. Like, because there's a limit. There's a limit for everybody. Look what we saw the Dodgers do this past offseason. They didn't really do much, right? They didn't spend a ton of money, and people are like, well, they're saving up for Ohtani. That's not really the way free agency works. They could have signed a bunch of one-year guys and still had a bunch of money for Shohei Ohtani, right? And they didn't even really do that. So every team has a limit. Dodgers, Mets have a limit. They saw the Correa physical and were like, yeah, let's not risk $300+ million to do that. Every team has a limit. And while Stanton's limit with the Mariners might not look like what fans want it to look like, if you admit that there's a limit, that means there's a budget. And that means that there's somebody in charge of managing that budget, and that's Jerry Dipoto. And Jerry Dipoto knows what that budget is. Justin Hollander knows what that budget is. John Stanton knows what that budget is. We do not. We're just sitting here pretending, right? We're thinking we have a general idea, but we really don't know at the end of the day what that looks like and what are the consequences of that, or what do the circumstances have to look like for Stanton to go, what the hell? And because at some point, at some level, it might make sense for John Stanton to say, what the hell? Let's just get this guy. Let's get that guy. Let's get this guy and win a World Series, and we'll just make up for it on the back end. I don't know what that is because I don't know what the limit is. I don't know what the actual budget is.
I think if they're going to go all out, like you're making the point of for anybody, it's going to be for the guy next year. Like there's no guarantee they land him, but Dipoto usually doesn't offer contracts like that. That's at least my 2 cents on it, that if he's going to give out some 10-year contract, it has to be a unicorn type of baseball player, which of course Ohtani is.
And we're hearing about, at least back channel, I'm hearing about numbers like 15 years and $575 million.
15 years. Okay, so the 15 years is to dumb down the payroll, the year-to-year payroll, kind of like what the Padres tried to do with it was with Judge. I think they offered him. Sure. I think they gave him 14. Sure. Right. I think that was
Yeah, even Brandon Nimmo got a deal like that. Nimmo could have got 160 or could have got 140, 150 for 5 or 6 years, but he got more guaranteed money and drew the AAV down by taking 8 years instead. It's the same idea. Yeah. Xander Bogaerts got more guaranteed money by taking an 11-year deal or whatever instead of 8 years and $20 million less. So they know they're not really going to be earning that money later. Just like you said, Lyle, they know that when they're 38, they're not going to be very good. So if they were a free agent at that point, they're not getting $20 million a year on the market. So they might as well take it now, even if it drags their AAV down. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know if Ohtani's going to end up getting 15, but when those kinds of numbers are being floated around, like, it's going to get a little crazy. It's going to get crazy. And I think ultimately it comes down to the Mets and the Dodgers at the end of the day. In terms of dollars, like if Ohtani takes the biggest offer, I think one of those two teams are going to be it.
Everything we've heard from him, though, from his camp, and I don't know how true it is, it's just that money isn't the number one priority. Of course, when you're throwing around $600 million, you could say, oops, I forgot that. But it seems like that might not be the deciding factor. If we're going to shed the slightest bit of optimism that it's not just going to be who's the highest bidder.
Yeah, where does he want to be? Yeah, because, I mean, I don't know if Seattle gets involved here seriously at all. They're going to be rumored until they're not, but if the Dodgers are out there floating $500+ million and the Mets are out there floating $500+ million and the Angels are willing to go $450-500 million plus, which they might be, especially now that Artie Moreno is going to hang around, like who else gets involved? Like who else can get involved? Maybe the Yankees decide this is just a player we need to go break the bank for and put him next to Aaron Judge in the lineup and put him next to Garrett Cole and go win a World Series or two. I don't know. We'll see. Does Boston get back on the train of spending money? I would say probably not, but I guess it's possible because the revenues are huge. I don't know who else can really get involved there. Maybe San Diego. Like maybe San Diego's kind of the dark horse here because they're already spending tons of money and there's really no end in sight. But at the end of the day, yeah, where is Ohtani going to be comfortable? Where has he actually spent time where at this particular point, heading into his platform year, his walk year, where has he spent time? Like if we were handicapping this right now, other than the dollars, other than the largest offer and a great chance to win, Mets, Dodgers, or where he's familiar with, the Angels, where else makes sense? I don't know. Maybe only Ohtani knows and the people that are close to him. I'd like to ask Mike Trout that question and get an honest answer, to be honest with you. I don't know how close he actually is with Ohtani, but I'd like to ask somebody like Trout, if you had to bet and you couldn't bet the Angels, where do you think Ohtani is going next year? I bet his guess would be pretty good.
That's an interesting way to think about
It's
it.
not going to be.
He just seems like he just declined to comment on that. I feel like
he would. That's why I
Mike
qualified it as if he gives you an honest answer. I bet he'd have a really good idea. I'd like to ask his teammates. They might actually have a better idea than Ohtani himself.
Yeah, no, it's possible. And you're right. I mean, the odds of it being Seattle is probably incredibly slim. I think people just like to hold on to hope, and especially because they were essentially runner-ups last time, or however you want to claim it, that they've got a shot again. But again, I mean, nobody really knows the level of money that they'd offer.
I think if the money was going to be there, I think they would. I think it would make it doesn't make sense that he would continue to have interest in Seattle as a market and where Seattle is headed as a team. I don't know. Who knows? Like, you can get really creative with contracts too. So like Seattle did with the Julio deal. I don't know. And again, you guys made the point. Maybe Ohtani's like, once it gets to a certain point, 300 million, 350 million, 400, whatever that number is, like, who cares? Or I'd rather, maybe he pulls a Tom Brady and signs for 275 because, again, maybe that's the threshold for him and he'd rather play for a team that had a little bit more space to go out and spend and win. If that's what's number one, I mean, he's signed a big deal with New Balance. He's going to make, $1 billion over the next 10 or 15 years at New Balance. Maybe you're right. Maybe that's ultimately at the end of the day, he doesn't want to go to LA. He spent some time in the area. Maybe that's not it. Maybe he's not a fan of New York. Maybe he's not a fan of Chicago. It's a good question. I don't know how to handicap it outside of who I think is going to offer the biggest money. It's impossible for me to do.
I think next offseason is going to be really, really fascinating because I think it's the first time in a long time. I think baseball could have an offseason that rivals what we see maybe in the NBA and the NFL. Like this year, I had no idea free agency started this week, but you could, you log on to any social media website and the NFL, once free agency starts firing, people are all over the place. And I finally think with Ohtani that could be it. I mean, people are going to be just hanging on the edge.
I think he actually signs quick. If you're asking me right now, and I know you're not, but if you were, how quickly does Ohtani? I think it's pretty quick. I think he signs maybe before the winter meetings. Like, I don't think this is going to drag out. He's not the kind of guy that wants the attention. He's not going to sit around and kind of be hanging there and not really know where he's playing. I think he's going to want to know, and he's just going to tell his agent, just get me this and get me to that place and then walk away. I think that's what the conversation is probably like, and I think that's what we end up seeing next year.
Divish actually kind of made an interesting point. We had him on a couple weeks ago, and I hadn't thought about this, and I don't know how much this will play a factor. But he was talking about how his mom's from Japan, and he's talked with a bunch of people that are involved with baseball in Japan, and they were kind of thinking that another view Ohtani might have on this is he was saying that in Japan, signing with the best team that's already a super team or taking the most money isn't quote unquote the honorable thing. So maybe that's something he kind of takes into account. It was just a point that Divish made that I hadn't thought about. And I thought, oh, maybe that's another thing that plays a factor.
Yeah, it's not necessarily something they do. In free agency over there isn't a frenzy the way it is over here either. So yeah, and that's why I wouldn't necessarily handicap the Dodgers and the Mets as favorites, other than they're going to probably be the ones that offer the most money. I don't know that they're actually the favorites, even if they are the ones that offer the biggest contracts because of that. Players that come over from overseas, Korea, Japan, even Cuba, they have different priorities, and sometimes it's just how they grew up or how they learn the game or what they're used to. But Ohtani certainly seems to fall into that category. Like, he's going to probably pick a place that offers a chance to win, and obviously they're going to offer a ton of money, but that doesn't mean it's going to be a big market. That doesn't mean it's going to be the super team, the Dodgers, the Yankees, the Mets, things like that. So it's a good point. It's going to be fascinating. I think, to me, the thing that's most interesting about Ohtani right now is, do the Angels end up trading him? Because they have to know their chance to keep him aren't great at this point. Like, things would have to go so well the first half of the season for that to change. But I wouldn't put it past them. I definitely wouldn't say the Angels have no chance, but I'd put them behind, probably half of those other teams that we've been talking about, the bigger markets and some of those clubs like San Diego and Seattle that might be in play even if they're not in the bigger markets.
What's the haul like for him?
Yeah, that's a great question. Pretty big. You're probably looking at an Angels team that's going to prefer a combination of an impact prospect or two with an impact major leaguer or two, which is going to make it really difficult. Like, what contender that's trying to pick up Shohei Ohtani for the stretch run, because that's what you're doing, is going to want to give that up? And that's going to make it really interesting to see what happens. Are the Angels at the end of the day willing to essentially give up on their chances to keep Shohei Ohtani and take back prospects in return instead of getting major league quality players in return that help them this year and beyond. So if they're willing to trade for prospects, we're probably going to see Ohtani. I don't know about probably traded, but they're going to get into deep conversations if they're willing to do that. If they're not, I don't think it goes very far. I think he finishes out his contract and then hits free agency coming out of the Angel season.
You can tell me I'm an idiot if you think this question is just stupid, which
idiot.
is totally fine. But if Ohtani goes somewhere else next year, I mean, this is just kind of something I've thought about. At what point does Mike Trout kind of sit there and think, like, am I ever going to play in another playoff game? Like, is there ever a point?
Isn't he thinking that right now?
Yeah. Like, is he sitting there and thinking to himself, like, is it time for me to finally ask for a trade? Is there ever a point where it gets to that point?
That's a good question. I'm not sure Mike Trout is the kind of personality where he would force that. It's something his agent could. That's a possibility. I don't know that Trout is that kind of a personality. He's pretty loyal. I remember hearing an interview with him, actually with Dave Sims on the Mariners Network. Dave asked him, why LA? Like, why have you made LA home? And he just said that his wife fell in love with LA and living at the beach, even though they were from the East Coast, even though they're from Jersey, New York. And that was it. And now they've been there, 12 years or whatever. I don't know. It would take a lot, I think, for Trout to ask for that. I think as long as they go into seasons with a chance and he knows that the owner is committed to winning. And the one thing I think we can say about Artie Moreno that isn't just, hey, he meddles too much, or what, he's obviously not cheap and he's willing to spend to win. Like, it just hasn't happened. His meddling hasn't been helpful, but it just hasn't worked. They've spent money in a lot of the wrong directions and it just hasn't worked out. And he allowed Mike Scioscia to derail Jerry DiPoto's plan, or maybe they are in the position the Mariners are in right now. But yeah, I think as long as Trout is sold on the direction of the team, probably sticks it out. It'd be really weird to hear. I'd be surprised if we ever heard that Mike Trout is asking for a trade. I'm not saying it's impossible. It just seems weird, doesn't it? Doesn't it seem out of character for him?
Totally.
Yeah.
I just wonder if he's just got the itch to play in a postseason game, try to win a World Series. I mean, obviously he does, like every player, but I guess to the point where he thinks I might have to do it somewhere else.
Yeah.
That's where my mind was going.
Yeah, I certainly don't know Mike Trout personally, so it just seems from afar that it's not in character. But who knows? He's getting a little older. He's on the other side of 30. It's kind of time for them to win and for him to have that opportunity. And he's only been there once. And hey, guess who was the general manager when he had that opportunity?
It's true. I think anybody that's been listening to this interview now for the last 25, 30 minutes, whatever it's been, can probably tell. I mean, your stuff really well, both baseball, the Mariners, prospects, and people who follow you on Twitter certainly know that too. And we've both followed you for a while, and I've always wondered, how did you learn as much about the Mariners as you have over time? Because like, there are a lot of smart Mariners people out there, but I know, like, when I see you talk about them, like, I weigh it differently. I weigh it a little bit more than some other people.
Oh, wow. I appreciate that. Thank you. I think you have to, first of all, you have to care about it. You have to care about actually learning it and not trying to cheat it, not trying to cut corners. That's the hard part. And I think one of the advantages I have over some others is how many different levels of the game that I've been able to learn from people. Like, I've seen high school kids, I've seen college, I've seen minor leagues at every level of the minors, I've seen big leaguers. And for the last almost 20 years, I've been able to ask people in baseball questions on a regular basis, and not just pumping them for information. I'm pumping them for, what am I looking at here? And learning the subjective scouting side of it, as well as talking to some people that like to move data around and come to conclusions and provide, analytics, quote unquote, as most broadcasts like to call it. John Smoltz's favorite thing. Those people are looking at information that's factual and trying to come to projections with it. And I have access to ask people questions like that. So I'm trying to be as well-rounded as I can to form opinions and to, so to speak, come to conclusions. And I think that's what makes it unique for me. I think I've been doing it a long time too. I think that's the biggest advantage. I mean, how old are you guys? I'm 49. I turned 49 years old 2 weeks ago. which is a little scary to think of because when I first started, I wasn't that young when I started. I was in my 30s already. We're talking 2002, 2003 when I started really digging into this. So I've been at it 20 years, and that experience will help. You talk to a Ryan Divish, he sounds a little different when you talk to Ryan Divish than when you talk to, like, I don't know, the typical beat reporter, because Divish is invested in it. And Divish has spent time sitting behind a plate talking to Scott. You can tell the difference between a beat reporter or a columnist that goes the extra mile to learn that side of things, the scouting side of things, the front office side of things, the player development side of things, the numbers and how they meld it all together. And those that really don't and focus on it, it doesn't make the others wrong or worse, but it does make Ryan Divish a little bit unique in my opinion. That's why he's always been, my favorite of the beat reporters. But I've always tried to do that. I've seen Ryan at games. He'll sit back there, make notes, talk to scouts. He does the same thing. And that's how I've tried to differentiate kind of how I view the team, how I watch baseball, how I look at baseball from so many different layers. And I'm getting even more of that now in my day job with access to guys who evaluate players from the age of 13 or 14 all the way through college and the pro game. And, when you have access, and I'm very lucky, there's a lot of luck involved. This isn't like, I should talk to this guy because this is who he is. It was like, here's a nobody that has the nads to ask me a question. I'm going to go ahead and talk to this poor kid. That was kind of the approach to me when I was, when I was pushing through, and it all started in Everett in 2003. I was at a game, and Charlie Kerfeld, who at the time was with the Mariners, former Houston Astros pitcher, came up to me and asked me if I could check a score on my computer for him. And that's the first scout that I ever met. And Charlie has been a great resource for me ever since. And that just kind of gave me confidence. I'm gonna ask people questions. And I've since learned that if I started asking those questions sooner, I'd be a little further along. And it's one of the things that I push when I talk to younger people. Make the ask, man. Like, there's no such thing as a dumb question. Like prefacing things with like, this might be a dumb question, so please call me an idiot if it's a dumb question. Like, I get it, but there are no dumb questions. And I've asked a lot of questions that could have fallen under that category, but because I asked it, I gained information or developed a relationship, and that's been really big for me.
You were spending a lot of time in Everett, also in Tacoma as well, with that first gig you got.
Yeah, Inside the Park, when Joe and I were doing Inside the Park, Joe thought he'd reach out and say, "You think we could get credentialed at Cheney Stadium and at Everett Memorial?" And I was like, "No, no." And then he did, and it was like we were in. I remember the first game I watched was Rich Harden against Rafael Soriano at Cheney Stadium, which was a great matchup. And then the second game I saw was also Rich Harden against Rafael Soriano like a week later. Pretty crazy to see back-to-back starts like that. And having access like that and kind of a boots on the ground mentality, you'll learn a lot that way. It's pretty incredible. I remember walking into Dan Roan's office and asking him questions, the old manager of the Rainiers, and who was the one after that? They had a guy after that who had a really good player development history, and I'm drawing a blank on his name at this point, but Dave Brundage actually is the guy. He'd won championships at AA San Antonio in the system and came up to AAA. He was a lot of fun to talk to. People that ask me who was my favorite interview ever, it's Roger McDowell. Happened at Cheney Stadium, I don't know, 15, 16 years ago. We were sitting down the left field line at Cheney there, and I wanted to ask him about pitchers and the injuries and how we manage pitchers and handle pitchers and just get his take on the whole. Guys were dropping like flies in pretty much every organization, especially Pittsburgh with Brian Bullington and guys like that in the early to mid 2000s. And the conversation turned into his old Mets teams. And he was on that 86 Mets team that won the World Series and the 88 team that was in the LCS against the Dodgers, the Orel Hershiser-led Dodgers. But he talked more about the 87 Mets than the other two because he thought that team was actually better. But when you get those opportunities to talk to people like that and learn like that, it's endless. Like, the possibilities are absolutely endless. And I took notes on everything. I recorded a lot of stuff. I watch every Mariners game at least twice. So I get Kelnick's at bats twice. I get Julio's at bats twice. That way, when I see something that's different or new, I actually recognize it. I watch a lot of minor league games twice, usually on some sort of a DVR kind of a situation, so I can rewind and watch at bats, watch pitching deliveries, things like that, and ask questions. Asking questions is the most important thing I could ever teach a kid or a young person or even an adult. I'm telling friends of mine that are older than me, ask the question, ask them. Like, don't sit back and wonder, just ask the question. And that's really been helpful for me, even though I did battle, kind of the bravery wall a little bit. Do I want to walk up to he's the general manager of the Seattle. Do I want to walk up to Pat Gillick right now? Because I really didn't. I was afraid to do it, but I was glad I did at the end of the day. And that's really set me up for, to have a chance to talk about baseball and write about baseball, for a living, all these years to be involved at that level. And it's been a lot of fun. I get to come on and talk with you guys too. We've been spending like the last half hour, 40 minutes talking about Mariners baseball. And if I hadn't asked all those questions of all those people that scared me 10, 15, 20 years ago, we wouldn't be here talking about this. So that's really one of the biggest difference makers for me, is seeing all those games and developing relationships so I had access to people to learn more.
Where's your favorite spot in the minor leagues? It sounds like you've been to a lot of minor league spots then.
Yeah, I've seen most of the Cal League stadiums, about half of the old Midwest League stadiums, at least. Seen a few Eastern leagues, a few of the old International League stadiums. I think my favorites, I really do like Cheney Stadium, as long as you're sitting behind the plate. If you're up in the press box, you can't see down the left field line. So a little bit of a design flaw there if you're sitting in the press area at that ballpark. But I saw Modesto and Stockton last year at Stockton and really, really liked that ballpark. That was one of my favorites. I think Nashville and Memphis are right at the top. I think Reno is near the top, and all three of those are in the Pacific Coast League. I haven't seen the Mets affiliate, the New Orleans affiliate down there. I haven't seen the Texas League. I saw San Antonio in 2003. I don't remember it a whole lot, but I remember really liking it, and a lot of folks like the backdrops in the Texas League quite a bit. So hopefully I'll get out and see more ballparks this year. But I'd say yeah, those three Pacific Coast League ballparks stand out the most for me. Hey, do you guys remember when Portland had a team? Or you might be too young to. Portland had a AAA team for a while.
Yes. Yeah. So I work here in Corvallis, Jason,
okay.
And I work with the former voice of the Portland Beavers, Mike Parker.
Beautiful.
So he's very he has plenty of stories to tell about them playing at Providence Park and such. It's a soccer stadium now, but I from everyone I hear about of all the stories about it, that was before my time.
Yeah, it's an interesting ballpark. You wouldn't go to it and say, or at least at the time, I don't know what it looks like now as a soccer stadium, but you wouldn't go to it and say, what a beautiful ballpark. You'd be like, huh. This is interesting because it's kind of sunken. If somebody really jumped into one and hit one out the left field, it's into the street downtown. And if you're standing around, you're liable to get hit. If you're parked on the side of the road, if somebody really tanked one like 460, you're getting hit. And then in right field, like above right field, there's like this there was like this gym, and you could see people on their treadmills and workout machines. It's just so odd, and so had all these little goofy intricacies about it. Yeah, Chris Metz got me in quite a bit down there in Portland. That was a lot of fun. I like quirkiness in ballparks like that quite a bit. So, I love T-Mobile Park. I love Oracle Park, the old AT&T down in San Francisco. I think the most underrated big league stadium I've ever been to is the new Busch Stadium in St. Louis. Like, I don't understand how people can go to that stadium and not go, this might be the best park here. This might be the best park in this league.
Yeah, I mean, so I was at Busch Stadium actually not that long ago, and I agree. I mean, so I guess the city of St. Louis, maybe for some people, tanks their opinion a little bit. I mean, that was just kind of what I took away. But if you're just talking about the ballpark,
how long ago were you there?
Outside the ballpark,
how long ago were you there?
Yeah, like it was like last May. No, and I was gonna say, but the ballpark itself, unbelievable.
Because the area around the ballpark is the model for the rest of Major League Baseball now. They have this whole like baseball city sort of thing going there, and It's amazing. And that's what DC is trying to build. That's what the Orioles really want. They got a little bit of that. That's what Seattle really wants, but haven't even made really one significant move other than buying the old brewery over there and building a new restaurant and pub. That's what every major league club wants around their stadium. It is absolutely amazing. So I would totally understand that if you saw the stadium before that was all built. But the last couple of years is essentially, it's amazing. It's absolutely incredible. I asked Ken Rosenthal last year. We were in St. Louis, actually. And I asked him, we're on the back of a golf cart being driven back to the hotel. And I go, hey, Ken, what's your favorite park? because this one's like underrated, right? And he goes, yeah, I really do like it here. He goes, but Ken worked in Baltimore, so he spent a lot of time at Camden. And so he said Camden was his favorite, but that Busch might be the one right next to that. Camden's kind of his home ballpark.
Camden, I got to go to Camden for the first time over the summer. It is just a beautiful ballpark. Maybe a little bit more shade, but the ballpark itself was unbelievable. What I like how you mentioned, like how the area around the ballpark for St. Louis really makes it that much better, because that's why I'm sort of a proponent for downtown ballparks, because that's not really something you can do when you plop a ballpark out in the middle of nowhere and you just surround it by a bunch of concrete. It really, I think, takes away from the atmosphere, which is why I like T-Mobile where it is. I'm just trying to think off the top of my head, like what you would do to sort of make it like that ballpark atmosphere you're really shooting for.
Yeah,
around
you know
T-Mobile.
what would have been a good step one to that several years ago? Building a basketball arena south of T-Mobile Park. Putting that much more value in every other venue and every other business that might want to be down there. But yeah, usually it's just red tape. Like everybody agrees doing things like that is a good idea, but a lot of it's red tape. Who owns these buildings? Like, I think it's goofy that King 5 is literally kitty corner. The building that King 5 is in is kitty corner from the ballpark. That whole building over there, sorry, Chris Egan, you're like the greatest human being of all time, but your building should not exist over there. Like your building should be somewhere else. Let's move it. Let's put shops in there that are baseball related. Let's put restaurants in there. Let's put bars in there. Let's put merchandise stores in there. It's a perfect spot. Instead, it's very corporate-y and very, it's like, what are we doing down here? And then like, what is across the street when you're standing, like, and you're looking across at King 5, that building, when you look this way, what is it? Really nothing. Like, what are we doing down there? Like, I don't want to say it's wasted space. There are businesses over there, but they're not really the kinds of businesses that would benefit most or benefit from or benefit most of the people that are down there on a regular basis. Like people that have painting companies. And it's like, what are we doing? Right. Like, and they've been down there for years. And I think there's just a lot of red tape in terms of turning that around and making it kind of a baseball city sort of a situation.
Yeah, and you know what? The words didn't come out right about my experience at Busch Stadium. Like all the time I spent walking around the ballpark and in the ballpark, again, it was amazing. Like I have my own personal list.
You just don't like the town itself, which neither do I, like, bro. Yeah, neither.
Okay,
neither
okay. So that was it. Like when I started to walk around some of the rest of the town, I was like, eh. But no, the ballpark and the area around the ballpark,
yeah,
awesome. Like Busch Stadium's in my top 5 or 6 parks.
And about every 11 feet on the concourse in that stadium, there is a different kind of nachos that you can buy. Now,
I must have not.
When I was there last, I got one kind of nacho, and I was lucky enough to be working a game with Aaron Goldsmith, which means John Smoltz was there. And as goofy as that guy can be on the air, he's goofy in a positive way off the air. He got this huge plate of nachos, and because he didn't want to get stuff all over his shirt before the game, puts on this huge bib that went all the way down basically to his knees, and they end up showing it on the broadcast, and he ate that whole thing. But that stadium, like, seriously, like every 10 or 15 feet, it's like, oh, they have nachos that they put chicken on. Oh, they have nachos where they put like 9 kinds of cheese. Oh, they have nachos where it's more like a taco. It's like, is this nacho stadium? That's what it felt like. And I'm all for it because it's one of my favorite snack foods. So there are a lot of little things about that ballpark that are great. And I think every stadium kind of has that. Although to me, T-Mobile Park, what is the signature thing at T-Mobile Park? The
roof. Grasshoppers.
I get grasshoppers could be, yeah. If you go away from food, the roof, obviously. But I don't know, the garlic fries, which are just awful. Like, come on, like,
You're not a garlic fries person?
So get out of here with your garlic fries, like, right? Like
they're
like
good.
I
love
like
them.
How dare you infringe upon my comfort watching a baseball game with your garlic fries? That's my approach to garlic fries. Yeah, they're not for me.
I would say that's the signature thing. I think now that you mention it, like T-Mobile, it might almost be at fault that it has too many options.
Yeah, because now there's not this one thing that sticks out. Yeah, that's a good point.
Right.
I like the garlic fries. But I'm in the category of people, I think Ryan Divish included, who do not like the pen. That's the part of T-Mobile Park I stay away from.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, that's not for me either. Yeah. I'm too old to hang out in the pen. I walk out there and people are like, what's this old guy doing here?
I just want to be with people that want to watch baseball, and that's not exactly
too many people with their back to the field for you.
You got You just got to push to you just got to go to the front.
It's true. You got to get there early.
Get all the way
in
the front row.
Yeah, you got to get there early.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the dedication.
Y'all might,
and they have all the beer
y'all
options.
might be pretty enough to get up there. Usually they only let the ladies up there. It might work for you guys if you get there early enough. You know that's how they do it, right? I've
never tried pushing it.
I am absolutely lying.
No, I didn't think so.
Right now, yeah.
Well, maybe we'll have to give it a shot at some point this year and
Absolutely.
report back.
Yeah.
You know, you said something a couple minutes ago that I actually really wanted to ask you about, because you were talking about, one, riding back in a golf cart with Ken Rosenthal. You were also talking about working a game with Aaron Goldsmith and John Smoltz. I think this is something that maybe not a lot of people know about you, but that is another job you have, is you do stats for Aaron Goldsmith for national baseball games and some of the national football games that he does, whether it be college or NFL. I guess mostly Goldsmith does college, but how did you end up making that?
Total luck. Like in 2019, I was on a weekend vacation in Oregon at Multnomah Falls, and Goldsmith texted me. And I knew Goldsmith a little bit from when Steve Sandmeyer and I had the radio show at CBS, because we had him on, and when we did a remote, he would always come over and sit down and talk to us. So I knew him a little bit. And he texted me one day and he goes, hey, it's Aaron Goldsmith, and I'm curious if you'd like to go to St. Louis. The first trip happened to be St. Louis as well, and do stats for me for the Cubs and Cardinals on Saturday. And it was like the previous Sunday. So I'm sitting around Sunday, and it's like 5 or 6 days away. And I remember replying saying, well, I don't know really what that means or what that entails, but yeah, like, why would I turn that down? Right. So just incredibly lucky, like right place, right time. Like I think somebody said to him, like, maybe see if Churchill can do it, and yeah, so Aaron's no longer going to do Fox games. So he won't be gone for all those weekends during the baseball season. He won't be gone in September doing college football, which would be great for Mariners fans that want to see him on the television broadcast. But it was just pure luck, like just about everything else that's ever happened to me. So much fun to go on those trips, baseball and football. And for football, I was the spotter. So I used to make the joke that all I did was point at things. Because if you know what a spotter is, that he's just helping the play-by-play guy. Like, this guy made the tackle, this guy recovered the fumble, this guy caused it. That's all I'm really doing. So I'm standing there watching a football game and getting paid to do it. It's ridiculous, right? So just luck. I was just lucky. I wasn't really necessarily all that great at it. But the play-by-play guy kind of dictates what he wants pregame and what he wants during games. And Aaron always made it great. And I got to know Aaron, the last 3 or 4 years doing that. And that was a really fun experience. And then I get to come on podcasts like yours and drop names like Ken Rosenthal and John Smoltz, for crying out loud. So how much more fun does it get? Eric Karros. I remember meeting Eric Karros a couple of times. I remember, I would tell you this, the guy that I enjoyed meeting the least, and I don't mean because he was like a bad dude or he was rude or anything like that, was Tom Verducci. We were in DC doing a game, and an analyst was Tom Verducci, who I actually think is pretty decent on the air. I actually like the broadcast. I like what he brings to the table. But the biggest reason I didn't really enjoy meeting him and talking to him was because I tried to tell him that George Kirby was better than Logan Gilbert, and he wasn't having it. And I'd really like to run into Tom Verducci again, just to act, because he wouldn't remember me, because I only met him the one time. And just ask him which guy he likes better now and for the long haul, just to see if he's changed his mind, and then remind him that I tried to tell him that. Like, just to blow my ego up just a tiny bit there. But he was just not having it. And he was just like, he just put up a wall, and he was like, nope, that's not going to happen. Nope. And I was like,
That's so
all
funny.
right. I think I'm right really still.
Funny.
Like, this was in July, by the way. So Kirby hadn't really done a ton, right?
Yeah.
So.
No, especially because, like, if you look at Logan Gilbert's Savant page, Logan Gilbert's still a good pitcher, don't get me wrong, but he gets hit fairly hard, and there's still some stuff I think he has to clean up. Kirby, TJ and I were just talking about this last week. He has a chance to throw as many as like 7 pitches this upcoming year, and we looked. The only guy that threw 7 pitches in the big leagues last year was Ohtani. Right,
absolutely crazy. Yeah, we might see him just use the cutter instead of the slider. So we might be down to 6, want. He's incredible. Like, when he started going back to the 2-seamer, which is a pitch he's had and just never really thrown a lot, and it was working and moving, and I'm like, what are we looking at here? Like, this is Greg Maddux with velocity. Like, this is essentially the closest thing to a modern day Greg Maddux with velocity at that particular age anyway, that we've seen in the last 25 years. Like, guys do throw harder now. Maddox was like 90 to 92 most of his career. Well, Kirby's going to be like 94 to 97, dotting every area of the zone with, like you said, maybe up to 7 pitches, depending on the day, depending on the month, depending on the year. He's a lot of fun to watch. And it's a lot easier to project guys like that pound the strike zone and have really easy deliveries. Like you said, Gilbert's got some things to clean up, although I like what we've seen so far in spring. I like his curveball usage, and he looked pretty good early on Tuesday in his latest outing. So we'll see what I like. Both guys are really good. Both guys are number 3 or better starters. I'm just a Kirby guy, just a big George Kirby fan.
This is a pretty lofty. It's a pretty lofty thing, but it makes sense. It makes sense. Before, I think we got a couple more Mariners questions, but I have one more non-Mariners question for you, because you said it was going to be your project this season on Twitter to watch all 30 broadcast teams and then rank them. Lyle and I are both broadcasters. We both went to school. We have degrees in sports journalism. We've done a ton of play-by-play. So we pay, closer attention than the general fan, probably not as close as you, but to what a given broadcast is. So looking at that for the season, like, what are you looking for? Do you have an early favorite of what's going to be number one, or what they're after?
So what I'm going to try to do is be as objective as I possibly can, with the admission that I'm going to favor certain types of things on broadcast that other people might not. So this will be a subjective ranking, but I'm going to be as objective as I possibly can. I'm going to try to think for the casual fan and for the fan that likes to get a little nerdy and geeky about data and things like that, and just kind of roll it up into a ball and just kind of see what happens as I watch. I'm not a big voice guy. I don't really care all that much about the broadcaster's voice. It really doesn't matter to me. I mean, I can recognize, like, ooh, listen to that. Like, that is a radio voice. But can you, like, I think most people think Vince Scully's one of the greatest, if not the greatest, baseball play-by-play guys of all time. Did he have a great voice? Not really. It was very distinct, but did he really have a great voice? I mean, I don't think so. And everybody loves him, and he's great and elite, and again, maybe the best of all time. So, so I'm glad that I have that to kind of roll back on. So now it can just be substance. And now I can think about things like, do I always know even though I'm watching television, do I understand what's going on? Do they talk too much? Do they talk over the analyst? Does the play-by-play guy get the analyst involved? Are there 3 guys in the booth? How does that dynamic work? Some people don't like 3-man booths. Sometimes it can work. I think it depends. And I'm focusing on the TV broadcast, not the radio broadcast, because that's a whole other ball of wax. So yeah, I think, and I haven't really written down, but I will, kind of the criterion, for that. And as soon as I do, I'll have a better answer. But yeah, I want to think for everybody that watches baseball games, the casual fan that watches a game or two a week, the fan that watches every night but isn't really a baseball nerd, so to speak, and then the absolute diehard that tries to know and hear everything and understand everything. Does the broadcast bring something to the table for everybody, and is it proportionate to the expected size of the audience? Because most of the people that watch those games are just casual fans. Like, we know that. So a little bit bigger piece of the pie has to go toward what the casual fan needs out of the game. But I think even geeks like us, I think you guys would throw yourselves into that category. You still need all those basic things when you're watching a game. You still need, hey, remind me how many outs there are, even though I know I can look up at the screen, or, remind me that Diego Castillo has pitched 2 days in a row, so he's probably down. Because if I'm watching a game, like if I'm at a game or I'm watching a game, it's a little bit different. But if I'm watching a game just to have fun and I'm not really thinking about things like that, if I'm more of a casual fan, I need to be reminded of that. And even if I'm the nerd that's like, boy, I don't like the Diego Castillo matchup, Aaron Goldsmith or Dave Sims saying, we were told before the game that Diego Castillo is probably the only guy down in the bullpen. I need that stuff. But if you watch broadcasts, not all of them are good at reminding you of those things. Not all of them are good at asking the questions of the manager and the pitching coach or the hitting coach or whoever might be the relevant conversation at that particular time in the broadcast, things that they might need to know during that day's game. Some of them are good at it and some of them really aren't. I can tell you from my experience working with them, Aaron Goldsmith is going to do that homework. I know that. So, and that's going to be the tough one for me. If I don't rank the Mariners number 1, first of all, will I live to see the next day, and will Aaron Goldsmith be arrested right away, or will he? No. And if the Mariners aren't number one, where do they rank? That's going to be the big question, because that's obviously the broadcast team that I hear the most, that I listen to the most, that I know the most. I have conversations all year round with Dave Sims as well. Nobody really knows Mike Blowers. So I'm not sad that I don't know Mike Blowers. I don't take anything from that. But yeah, they're going to rank pretty high. I think the home team is going to. But I'm looking forward to doing that. I'm going to start out. I'm going to do it division by division, I think, and listen to at least one full game, take notes, and then around the 50 game mark, just kind of see how many teams that I've watched, that I've listened to, and how many times I think I need to go back. And I'm going to make this as scientific as I possibly can. I'm going to have a lot of fun doing it. I also hope to meet some of these people on the road this year, which is going to be fun. I plan on visiting a bunch of ballparks this year that I haven't been to. I'm starting with Cleveland and Pittsburgh on a trip in May. And on that same trip, I'm going to go to the Buffalo minor league ballpark for the first time. So I'm going to fly into Cleveland, Pittsburgh, and Buffalo and do that. But I'm hoping to meet some of those broadcast teams too. So it'll make it even harder not to rank them high, because I'm going to like them personally, right? And that's how it always goes. So it's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Were you texting Goldie every single day when he was getting courted by St. Louis?
No, because should I tell you this? I already knew. I knew what was going to happen. Yeah, I knew before he went to St. Louis what was happening. I just couldn't tell anybody. Yeah.
All right.
And I almost thought of, asking him, hey, do you mind if I break this? But then I thought, no, let's let somebody with a bigger, like, beat reporter style following break this, and they'll talk to Aaron, and it'll be in the Times, and it'll be on Root Sports, and it'll be on 710. And so I just let it go. But yeah, I knew, like, I'm not sure, to be honest with you, how much Aaron has talked about this, but he had some family move out to Seattle in November from St. Louis. And I just thought, I'm not even going to ask him. I know he's not leaving. I know he's not. And then I heard from him before he went to St. Louis that he's going to do it, but he was like 99.999% sure he just wasn't going to take the job. And as soon as he realized, I just can't do this, like, he bowed out. Yeah.
Yeah, he's another person we definitely hope to have on here at some point. I know he's already been asked a million times about the whole Cardinals, Mariners, like, off-season free agency that he had, but just to hear a little bit about it from him. Plus, he's another baseball nerd, so I think
here, do this when you guys have him on. Do this. Ask him something that involves me that would be funny. Like, ask him something along the lines of how thankful he is that he got to work alongside me for the last 3 or 4 years doing football, and something along those lines. And he'll probably sniff it out that I set you guys up for it, but do something like that. So before you have him on, like, let's have a short conversation, and I'll give you something really good to ask. Perfect. Aaron Goldsmith is one of my favorite.
They were welcoming Aaron Goldsmith on, just kicking it off, Aaron. How thankful are you that Jason Churchill made your career?
Maybe something not quite that, but yes, right along those lines. That's exactly the flavor that you should take. He is, like, when you watch people on TV, they always tell you, things like, don't meet your heroes, things like that. And when you watch a guy broadcast games in your hometown, and then you meet him, and he's not only what you hoped he would be, but beyond, that's Aaron. It really is. I cannot say enough good things about Aaron Goldsmith as a person, and getting to meet his kids, and getting to meet his family, and getting to work alongside him. He is just like he does the little things, man. And like, I told him that really quick story. So the broadcasters, the play-by-play guys, get a car allowance. The stats guys don't. And when I say car allowance, that doesn't mean rental car. Because when I did football, I was the driver. That was one of my jobs as a spotter. I also drove. So, like, I would drive, like, Aaron, the stats guy, and, like, Brock Heward or Mark Helfrich to the state. That somehow, I think Brock Heward nominated me for that. And I didn't know that was part of my role, and it turned out to be part of my role. So that was me. But, like, they'll send a car for the play-by-play guys at the airport, take you to the hotel. You don't have to wait for an Uber. Like a little car, like a big, black, sweet-looking SUV or something along those lines, right? Well, Aaron always, like, like, a lot of times we had the same flights, and we're on the same plane, and he would always make a first class versus non-first class joke, by the way. He was always in first class. I usually was not. So he would always pretend like he couldn't talk to me anymore. But we'd get off the plane and he'd wait for me, and we'd walk, and I'd like, he would include me in his car allowance, right? And that may seem like a small thing, like, well, he'd be a jerk if he didn't, but I didn't think of it that way. And one time we were in Atlanta. It was the last game we ever did together. And we got off the plane and we're walking, and we see the driver, and Aaron's like, yeah, I'm Aaron, there's two of us. And the guy's like, cool. And he takes our bags and all this. And I go, hey, Aaron, what if all this time that we've been doing this, that you would wait for me off the plane, and we'd walk all the way to where you're going to get your car, and then you just get in your car and say, see you at the hotel later, and you just take off and leave me sitting there waiting for an Uber. And I really wish one time he would have done that, because it would have been a story that I would have told my entire life. But he thought about things like that. He thought about, like, early on, like, how do I make sure Churchill's comfortable at the ballpark? Like, maybe this is a ballpark he's never been to. He's never met these people. The first time I met John Smoltz or Ken Rosenthal, like, Aaron made sure I was included, even though a lot of this stuff was really meant for the broadcast people, the actual voices that you're going to hear on the broadcast. But I never got left out, not in baseball, not in football, because Aaron made sure I was always involved. I was always on the emails. I was always involved when the company was going to buy dinner. Like, we went to Manny's in Minnesota, like in Minneapolis, for the Twins game, the Friday night before the game. And this is a place, like, they give you a private room. And there were, like, I don't know, 10 of us there, and the bill's like $2,500 afterwards. Like, one of those places. It's a place I don't belong, to be honest with you. But, like, he made sure I was included in that. Like, he's that guy. And when we had a conversation after he told me, like, I'm done with Fox and I'm staying in Seattle. Like, he apologized to me, first of all, for, like, the Fox thing not being on my plate anymore. Like, come on, man. Like, what kind of guy does that? But, like, I can't say enough great things about Aaron. He's just, he's a great dude, and he's fun to listen to, and he cares about the gig, and he cares about the game. And I think the one thing that I truly, truly disagree and think Aaron is insane about is the pitch clock. Broadcasters love the pitch clock, and I am out on the pitch clock. That's about it. But it was a great experience, to answer your question. I had a lot of fun. He was great. It wasn't about making extra money. It was about being able to go in to see those ballparks with those people and hear John Smoltz tell stories and hear Aaron's a great storyteller too. So if you can get stories out of him when you guys have him on, man, yeah, he will tell stories till the cows come home. Yeah, it'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, the little bit of time I've gotten to talk with him, yeah, he was always great too. Like, we talked with him a couple times when he was doing ASU games, and he got lunch with me once and was awesome. Yeah. Like, talking about broadcasting. He will not ignore people. Genuine.
If you get a hold of him, he will talk to you. He will answer. Yeah. So when you guys want to get him on, as long as he can do it, he will absolutely do it. Like,
Yeah. Okay, I got to ask you this, because all this Aaron Goldsmith talk sparked one more question in my head before maybe we get back to one or two final Mariner questions. Is sometimes on Twitter you'll tweet out, like, feel good broadcast edition, and it's usually when Goldsmith
and Blowers.
What do you mean by that when you're talking about that?
Knowing that I'm gonna get, like, let's say the game is incidental in the fourth inning, it's 10-0 Mariners, or the White Sox are up 8-0, and the starting pitcher, and it's just a dog game. That is when Aaron Goldsmith is at his best, because he will get Mike Blowers more involved, and it seems like Mike Blowers wants to be involved in the game at that point. Like, I don't want to say Blowers is checked out, but the analyst often checks out, a lot when the game just is a dog like that. But that's when the funny happens. That's when Goldsmith brings out some of the fun in Mike Blowers being a little bit unheard of in some cases. Like, it's harder to get. You guys remember, I think it was last year, maybe the year before, but I think it was last year, when Aaron mentioned that they went to buy ice cream before the game, and Mike Blowers' card didn't work. Do you remember that? Blowers did not like the fact that Aaron mentioned that his card didn't work, because it made it kind of sound like the card was declined and Blowers was broke or something. And Mike was like, the card didn't get declined. And, like, you just tell, like, there's this slight level of annoyance. And I mean, I just called it the feel good edition because, like, first of all, I stole that from SportsCenter from 25, 30 years ago when Craig Kilborn would be on with Carl Ravitch, and he called it the feel good edition. You know, he'd open up with that. So I stole that. But it's so much fun to hear Goldsmith challenge himself with pulling content from Mike Blowers, particularly in a game that's a dog. It's the best, and I think if I were Aaron and I were interviewing for a job, I would pull out like a 10-0 game and say, look what I do for your audience when the game is terrible and nobody cares about the outcome anymore. Look how I keep people. That's what I would do. Yeah, he's magic when it comes to that. And Blowers, you know, give him credit. He will play along just enough for things to be really funny when it works, when he's enticed to talk and react to Goldsmith in that way. So yeah, so that's why I call it the feel good edition.
Yeah, and I always enjoy it. Yeah, I'm the same way. I think he's phenomenal especially when it's like a blowout type of game. You were talking about Blowers' card. There was some game too. I can't even remember when it was, but they were talking about all being out at dinner, and Blowers made a little joke. He was like, "Yeah, Aaron, I can't believe you actually pulled your card out of your wallet or something like that." Like,
yeah, they have a lot of fun. That's one of the things, and like you don't hear that from everybody. You don't hear Blowers ribbing, you know, everybody. Does he rib Sims like that? I don't know. I don't remember hearing it. Does Sims, you know, rib Blowers like that? I don't know if they have that kind of relationship or not. But listening to other broadcasts, you don't hear that level of engagement between the play-by-play guy and the analyst. Some do it. There are a few. I think the Mets broadcast does a pretty good job. I think when Dave Cohn is on the Yankees broadcast, they do a pretty good job. But a lot of them are missing that element, and Seattle does that well. And Goldsmith's kind of the, you know, he's kind of the director of that. He's kind of the orchestrator of that, and he should be. Like he's their dude on TV. And from what I understand, he's going to do more games this year on television than he ever has before. So if you're a Goldsmith fan, I think that's good news.
Yeah, definitely. You know, if we were going to get back to one or two Mariners questions here as we start to kind of wrap this up, I've got to ask at least this one, because TJ and I have been trying to kind of crack a riddle here the last week or two, and for the life of us, we cannot do it. So we're hoping maybe you can provide some insight on this. Well, maybe riddle's not the right word, but we're staring at Luis Castillo stats because we've been talking about some pitchers over the last week or two and how they're going to kind of profile and project in 2023. I mean, we're looking at Castillo, who historically his changeup's been his best pitch of his career. It's been his out pitch. It's what he goes to. It was, at least by run value, when you look at Baseball Savant, his best pitch. His fastball's never graded as some elite pitch. I mean, it's a good pitch. He throws it hard. But fast forward to 2022, I mean, the results he got on his fastball were ridiculous, to the point where guys were slugging less than 200 against his fastball. Like, his numbers before that never even got close when you look at slugging against his fastball. So, like, how in the world does that type of progression and evolution happen in one season?
Sometimes it's just, it really depends on the situation, but sometimes it's just a matter of how often do you throw that pitch, or how do you use that pitch? What areas of the zone are you attacking? Because he throws both a 2 and a 4-seamer. And generally speaking, we would think, okay, 4-seamer up, 2-seamer down, get the run on the 2-seamer. 4-seamer has the same run to the same side, but it carries a little bit better to the plate and stays above the hands when you try to throw it up in the zone, things like that. But he can use both of those pitches in multiple ways. And I think maybe just where he was throwing it, the zones that he was using. When they made that trade, I thought one of the things I thought that I expressed on Baseball Things was, I think there's a pretty good chance that the Mariners get more out of Luis Castillo in general than the Reds did. And the biggest reason was they probably have a different idea of how he should go about using the pitches that he has. Not, hey, let's change the grip or anything like that necessarily. Not, let's change your delivery, but like, you know, it almost goes to the old reliever thing. Remember when they brought in Austin Adams and a couple of years back, and then he had a good like first half, and then they traded him, you know, to the Padres in one of the multiple you know, woodshed moments of AJ Preller's career where Jerry DiPoto just spanked him in a deal. It was the usage. It was, how do you use it? How often do you use it? And I look at Castillo the same way. If you pull up those slugging against or ex-WOBA numbers on his fastball, look at the monthly splits and see how different it is pre-trade and post-trade. because there is a little bit of a swing, upswing in fastball value after he got to Seattle. And I just think that tells me it's strategy. Without looking into it deeper, that tells me it's just strategic and how he's using his fastball. His changeup wasn't that great last year. Like, I see the run value, you're right. Like, the value's still there. Nobody's really hitting it, but it's not the swing and miss pitch that it was 2-3 years ago. And I think his slider is actually a better pitch than it was a year or two ago, and it might be the better of his secondary offerings right now. But he can get, I'm big on fastball value, always have been big on fastball value. If you have good fastball value, it takes pressure off your command, takes pressure off your ability to locate your secondary pitches or the quality of your secondary pitches. And even though Castillo has quality secondary pitches, the fact that he has two different fastballs he can get value from anytime he wants, I mean, that plays, that takes him quite a ways. That gets you through 5 innings right there, just using fastball on the occasional slider or changeup. And that's why he can go 6 and sometimes 7. I think he's a good, solid, like, number 2 starter. I know he's the Mariners' de facto number 1. But I think what we saw from him after the trade last year was legitimate number 2. Like, if he's in the Yankees rotation, he's right behind Garrett Cole. If he's in the Mets rotation, he's behind either Verlander or Scherzer and Verlander. He's that very next guy after the elites. Castillo's in that group right now.
That fastball, like, just the tenet of having a good fastball, seems like it is a core philosophy in what the Mariners do. If we're looking at one similarity between the 4 high-end starters in the rotation, I mean, it's the fastball. I mean, Robbie Ray plus, Logan Gilbert, that's his plus pitch. George Kirby, same thing. And Castillo had the best season of his career with that fastball. So I don't think that's a coincidence.
No, it's not. And the Mariners aren't really unique there. I just think they're unique to the Reds there and unique to a few other teams that are focused on other things. They're not really trying to scrape out every single victory at the big league level, and they don't have a lot of finished products where they can just, because you're so focused when you're a young pitcher. Teams are so focused on throw strikes. Like, command is one thing, but you have to just at least hit the strike zone a certain amount of time. You don't want to get the 2 and 3 ball counts. Like, you don't want to walk guys. So they're so focused on the basics that they don't get to the point where the guy's 25, 26, 27, 28 years old, and you can just take that a different layer and say, how about if you took the command and control that you've developed up to this point in your career and you started attacking different parts of the zone, or you started throwing a 2-seamer as well as the 4-seamer. Some organizations just aren't in a position to do that because there's risk there. Like, when Castillo is 25 years old, there's risk there because he's not established. He wants to get established. He's going to be he's probably going to want to avoid changing too much because he knows he's good and he's trying to establish himself, get to free agency, make a bunch of money. But now that he's there and he's making a bunch of money, it's like, I'll do whatever the team wants me to do. I'm theirs for the next 5 years. It's a little easier to do that. It's easier to do that for the Yankees or the Mets or the Dodgers or the Astros, and you're having success and you're on a good team and you have guys that are either entering their prime or they're already in their prime to some level, to try to get them to do a different thing or two to take their game up a step. Otherwise, these younger players are thinking, convince me then. Convince. Like, that's why it's impressive that the Logan Gilberts and the George Kirbys of the world are out there on their own doing things that could make them better this year, that sometimes include gripping a pitch differently, throwing a completely different pitch, throwing 2 completely different pitches, using their pitches differently, changing their deliveries. They're doing it themselves. And that's kind of, I don't want to say it's a new thing, but it's a newer thing in Major League Baseball where players are taking control of their own development all the way through their 30s. Like, this isn't you do that when you're 20 and then after that you just coast. You can't coast anymore, right? So they're taking it into their own hands. They're not necessarily sitting around waiting for the team to kind of dictate that. And that's why we see guys like Gilbert and Kirby doing things that maybe Luis Castillo didn't do a whole lot of before he came to the Mariners and started playing for a winning team. It gives you that leeway. Okay, I'm already this pretty comfortably, and the team's going to support me, and now I want to do this because I want to take another step.
Yeah, it has been pretty remarkable just what these Mariners arms have been able to do, especially because, I mean, you look on paper, I mean, the starting rotation has the chance to be the best it's been in some time. I think the roster has a chance to be the best it's been in some time. So if we were going to kind of give you one final question and one final Mariners question here, Jason, I think this is a good cap-off question, is how much better is this 2023 roster compared to the roster just a year ago in 22?
I will answer that question by asking you this question. How much better do you think the combination of Luis Castillo Julio Rodriguez, Cal Raleigh, and I'll cut it off right there. I'll just leave it right there. Just those three. I could go a little further. I could throw George Kirby in there, but let's just go Castillo, Cal Raleigh, and Julio Rodriguez. How much more valuable to the 2023 team are those three players? And you can think about wins above replacement. That's a good way to do it. Versus last year. If those guys were, I don't know what the totals are, but if those guys were worth 10 wins above replacement last year total to the Seattle Mariners, what are they worth this year? 11, 12, 13, 14, something like that, somewhere in that range, right? That's how much better they are because, right? That's how much better they are.
Yeah.
I think that's a good way to gauge it. Julio Rodriguez has a chance to take another step forward. Cal Raleigh has a chance to take a big step forward. They're going to have Luis Castillo for what? 15 to 20 more starts than they had him last year. That's an upgrade over what Chris Flexen was giving them or would have given them. You can stop right there. We can talk about Kirby being unleashed for another 20, 30 innings than he gave him last year. Logan Gilbert in another year. They have a lot of guys trending in the right direction. So if they were truly a 90-win team last year, which is probably pretty close and pretty fair, and that is the fact that it is how many wins they had last year, I think they're at 92, 93, 94 this year with a chance to get to 95, 96.
Oh, go ahead, TJ. It looked like you were going to say something.
Jason answered the question, so I was gonna
Guys,
add it, but
just how
you
good I am.
it.
I'm reading minds these days. How about that?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, I guess to kind of close off my final thoughts based on the WAR thing that you were just talking about. I mean, I guess I kind of know this off the top of my head, which kind of shows you, I guess, I focus all my time in the world into baseball and not much else. But I think off Fangraphs, Julio's WAR was like 5.5, Cal's was about 4, and Castillo's was also right around 4.
But for the Mariners, it wasn't 4. That's a key to this, right?
Right.
Yeah.
That's total. So, I mean, Julio could get as high as.
Would it shock you if he was a 7-win guy this year? Would it shock you? He only played 132 games last year. So if he plays 150, 145, 150, that's a 6-win guy if he puts up the same numbers, right? That's not even considering the fact that he could actually perform better in those 145, 150 games than he did last year in 130, whatever. And that's Julio by himself. So the upside's pretty big with this ball club. And I think Cal Raleigh, by the way, one of the things I just keep pounding in my own head, in my own conversations with myself, because I do talk to myself quite a bit. Cal Raleigh's batting average is something to watch this year. It's a weird thing to say because batting average is not a good indicator of how well a player is performing, but I do think it is a sign of progress for Cal Raleigh. You can't hit 200-ish and expect to put up a 320, 330, 340 on base percentage. I mean, he's not Ricky Henderson, right? Not hitting a $197 with a 370 on base, right? He's Cal Raleigh. He's a good player, but he's not Ricky Henderson. So if we see Cal Raleigh showing signs with an ability to hit 230, 240, and eventually, maybe not this year, but eventually 250, 260, as some of the rule changes help things like batting average. I mean, we're talking about a perennial all-star here and a guy that's probably going to make a lot of money, but might also, in his peak, be a top 10 MVP guy one year. Like, that's the kind of upside we're seeing. Would it? Let me say this. He's 25 years old, right? 25, 26. He hit, 25 homers last year. Would it surprise you if he hit 30 homers this year?
Yeah.
No. Okay.
No.
Would it surprise you if he hit 225 this year with a 310 on base percentage? Would it surprise you? No. That's only 20 points higher than what's last year, right?
Yeah. I say not. Yeah. No. 20 points higher, and you can even think of it this way. It's like, so what did Cal hit if you throw out his first month last year?
You can do the same thing with Julio.
Like a buck, like 050. Same thing with Julio, right? Like, what is he hitting? And that's just off of last year and not off a full offseason work. That's a bigger sample than everything that happened before that. So it means just as much because of recency and sample size as what happened before that. Now, none of us are sitting here saying April didn't count for Julio or April didn't count for Cal, but when you're trying to project forward, that's a good way to look at it. It's a really good way. It's possible. Like, I wouldn't bet on Julio hitting 340, but would I bet on him repeating his batting average and on base from last year at least? Yeah. And I think Cal Raleigh's going to take a 10, 15, 20% step, in the right direction. And I mean, we're talking about all-star potential MVP type in Julio Rodriguez as early as this year, all-star caliber catcher, 3, maybe 4 all-star caliber pitchers. You couldn't say that when we started last year. The confidence in saying that, we knew some of these guys had the ability, but now it's like the floor is a lot higher. So for me, when you push the floor up, and while it's not dollar for dollar or win for win, when you push the floor up, the ceiling goes up too.
There are so many fun storylines with this team to watch in 2023. It's going to be as exciting of a season as fans have experienced in quite some time. As great as 22 was, I think 2023 has the chance to be even better. Jason, you really previewed that well. You've previewed everything that we've talked about incredibly well, and I think this entire interview has been a blast. Mid-season or at some point during the year, we'll have to have you back on again to kind of catch up on some of these things and check in on all the things we talked about, because really this
you got it absolutely anytime, guys.
Thanks so much,
you got
Jason.
it anytime. By the way, do both of you live in Corvallis?
No, just me. I work here in Corvallis. I cover Oregon State here and there, or not here and there. It's pretty much my day job.
Where do you live,
Lyle?
For now, I'm back in the Northwest in Kirkland.
Okay, so you're not that far. You live in the same city as Aaron Goldsmith. How about that? Buzzing ears.
Yeah.
Exactly. I'm going to be in Corvallis at some point in April. If you're going to
come to Goss?
Yeah, if you're going to be in town, I'll come say hi, or you can come say hi, or whatever. We can make that happen. I'll get lunch or whatever. Lyle, we're neighbors, so let's not be strangers. It's ridiculous. You live like 15 minutes away. I'm on Mercer Island, so
definitely.
Let's go to a game. Do you come up, TJ? Do you come up for games every once in a while?
I will when I get some time off. Right. Yeah, when baseball season dies down, it's a little easier.
When college baseball season dies down, it's easier. Is that what you're saying? Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
All right,
yeah.
Cool. Sounds good. Anytime, guys. Let me know. All right.
Definitely. Jason Churchill, host of the Baseball Things podcast.
Thanks, guys. Peace out.
That was a fantastic interview with Jason Churchill. I know I've said it a bunch. I'll continue to say it. He is one of the smartest Mariners people you'll find. If you want to get smarter about the Mariners, go follow him on Twitter. Go find his work. I mean, he's awesome. He was absolutely one of my favorite interviews we've done. So we appreciate all the time he gave us too. All right, TJ, I think we're ready. Let's close out this show with Speak Your Mind. You've been kind of keeping me on my toes all day about this. So what are you thinking about this week?
I'm not one to venture into the NBA too often. I'm just not the biggest basketball guy. Doesn't help the Sonics left when we were, 10? That doesn't help, right, for my basketball interest. But there's no league like the NBA in terms of generating storylines. And another one this week that it totally flew right past me, and I didn't even think about this is something I should have been paying attention to closer. But Kyrie Irving's Dallas Mavericks are 7-13 since they traded for him. Just as we said when it happened, why would you ever trade for Kyrie Irving? Why would you ever, at this point of his career, attempt to deal with Kyrie Irving and the path of destruction that he has left behind? At not one stop, not two stops, not three stops. Like 3 stops. And his Mavericks are now sitting at 36-39, a game outside of the play-in. Are you kidding me? When this trade happened, the Mavericks were supposed to be Western Conference favorites. They were supposed to be Western Conference favorites. They are now not even going to get in the play-in tournament. That's unbelievable. They have lost to the 25-51 Charlotte Hornets twice in the last 4 days. The ones, without their best player in LaMelo Ball, who's been out almost all season. It is incredible the efficiency that Kyrie Irving can do this to teams. Just, it gets faster. It was 2 years with LeBron, 1 year with the Celtics. I'd probably say 3/4 of a year that he actually played with the Nets. And it has taken 20 games with the Mavericks.
And he's had other stars every stop of the way. It's not like he's playing on teams like the Hornets or like the Magic or somebody like that. No, he's playing on real teams with elite talent. Yet somehow he's always unhappy. I mean, I don't get how he hasn't just retired and hung it up at this point. I get that he's making I get he's making $40 million or whatever it is per year, maybe a little bit more than that. But you're always miserable. Why are you still playing if you're just miserable all the time?
And Luka's gotten kind of to be a mess too. He picked up his 16th technical foul yesterday, which gets you an automatic suspension, which I believe, I didn't double check. I believe that got waived, but once you get 16 techs in a season, you get an automatic 1-game suspension, with the Mavs needing to now win every game, which is crazy. And I see stuff floating on Twitter is like, would this run actually cause Luka to leave Dallas? Which would be crazy. Can you imagine? You have hit the home run of all home runs by getting Luka Doncic and trading for him with the Hawks, and he leaves because you make some bad personnel decisions and the team plays like absolute shit down the stretch and just to miss the play-in game. That's crazy. It just blows my mind, because like everyone could see it coming, and the Mavericks decided, you know what, it's worth it, but it was not, obviously.
I mean, this has to be it. If everything really crashes and burns in Dallas with Kyrie, there is not going to be another contender that trades for him, right? Like, there cannot be another contender after this that trades for him. The only way I feel like he keeps playing is, again, if he goes to some bad team, just puts up his numbers every night, complains whenever he wants, and kind of does whatever he wants. And he'll just make his money and not make the playoffs.
Got me. You really don't. I'm just at a point where, like, especially with a lot of these stars in the NBA, it's hard to like see them like some of these they can just carry teams at sometimes, and then also at the same time can just destroy them by literally just being a bad personality. That's it. That's all you need to do. One bad apple in a 5-person rotation on the floor kills the whole thing every time. Yeah, it's crazy. And you'd think teams would learn their lesson with Kyrie Irving, but what do we know? I mean, Kyrie Irving, just for the shits and gigs, could end up in either Phoenix or LA next year. Could you imagine that? He either goes back to LeBron or back to KD. Right? Wouldn't that be funny? This league.
Oh, I would laugh. It would be perfect script writing. We can put it like that. Man.
Well, I think, to be honest, I think he's probably favored to go to the Lakers. Right? He's got to be.
Probably.
That would be the only organization I could see that would be like, this is a great idea. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, it didn't work.
They thought Westbrook was a good idea, and I was trying to tell him. No.
Yeah. Well, fool you once, shame on them, but fool you twice, shame on you. If they trade for Kyrie Irving next year, that's on the Lakers. Okay, let's get to my speak your mind here. It's a little bit of a different tone than Kyrie Irving, and that gave me a good laugh, especially that little rant you gave there at the start. It's actually more about us. I was just kind of thinking this week as season's about to start. I mean, we're running now, 4.5 months on this podcast, and I was just kind of thinking back to the time we started, and we were pretty excited to start it. I mean, we both loved the Mariners for a long time, and we talked for a long time about starting something like this, and we finally had the time and felt like we had the skills to do it, I guess. And not only has it been a blast, I know on my end, I think on yours too, but hopefully for everybody that's listened so far, because I mean, without listenership, kind of becomes hard to do. But the fact people follow us on social media now and we get some real listens on the episodes, like, I'm not saying we're taking the world on or anything like that, but the fact that like just through 4 months with no baseball going on, that people want to kind of tune in, it's been a blast. And I don't think we plan to stop anytime soon. So, I was just kind of reflecting on that a little bit and thinking about, it's been a blast so far.
Got all deep on me there for a second. I needed a heads up.
Oh, my bad. It wasn't
getting a little sentimental here. It's been so hard. It's really been such a grind. Oh. I mean, it has been a ton of fun. And what I think the thing I've realized the most here on this podcast is like, I think not even just for like viewership wise, what we realized, just like how much fun just having other people on is. Like, we spent the first, 9 or 10 episodes. It was just us talking, and it's great when we're spitting numbers at each other. But then we get the first couple of guests, we get Jordan Schusterman and Joe Doyle on, and you really like peels back layers, and we can like loosen up and relax a little bit. And I hope to get to one point where all of our episodes are like our conversation we had with Jason Churchill. I mean, it's just us sitting there talking. It's like we don't need to be rolling through a script. Essentially, we're just sitting there, just like shooting the shit. Essentially. Though for an hour and a half about the Mariners, about life, about baseball, about Kyrie Irving, that's what good podcasts are. It gets to the point where we want to get, where it just feels like you guys are sitting there hanging out with us. Like, that's it. That's what the best podcasts do. You feel like you're sitting there right next to all the other podcast hosts and just hanging out, like listening to them have a conversation. That's all it is. Yeah. Right. So and that's what we hope to get to this. And we'll try and, incorporate some fun things as the season goes along to sort of loosen it up a little bit and add a fun element and things to keep track of. Like, I already know that as soon as I said Julio was going under 30.5 home runs, he's going to hit 31 by the All-Star break before he goes into the home run derby. And we can keep track of we welcome you into this episode. And Julio's home run tracker is at 22, and it is June 15th. Yeah, I guess I was wrong.
Oh, we'll track some stuff this year for sure. That's on maybe we'll track the Julio home runs on your end. On my end, we'll be tracking Jared Kelenic and Dylan Moore. That's for sure. But yeah, I mean, I think, I hope at least through the first 4.5 months, there's been a decent amount of where people just kind of feel like they're sitting with us and listening to a conversation, because that's what we try to have it be. And hopefully with our guests, it's kind of showed the same thing. And our goal with a lot of these guests is we're trying to get a lot of different perspectives on. I mean, we have somebody like Chris Langan on who knows more pitching than probably 99.99999% of the entire planet. We have somebody like Jordan Schusterman on who's in the, baseball content world, and he's got his own take on the Mariners, similar to how we do, who we pump out content similar to how he does, not at his level, but he's got a fan perspective. And then we have people on like Corey Brock and Ryan Divish who cover the team, and they've got their perspectives. And you know what? As time goes on too, we're going to start to try to stretch out some of the guests we have too. I mean, we'd love to have as many Mariners people as possible, but we're going to try to get some guests, just across baseball in general, get some fun interviews, maybe outside of the Mariners world, and keep incorporating it. Cause I think we can do that. And I think it's going to be interesting stuff. And like you said, with the fun stuff, I know I can't stress it enough, but we're going to do some cool stuff on our social media accounts when the season starts. Again, we're going to do some on-camera stuff around the stadium. I think we're going to plan to do some fan interviews, some food reviews, a bunch of stuff like that. Like, it's been fun through the offseason, but I think once baseball starts, we're going to be able to do that much more content. So hopefully only up from here.
What's the first thing you're trying tomorrow? I know you're going to be there tomorrow, so keep tuned to our social media accounts. I won't be there for opening day tomorrow. If you're listening to this on Wednesday, I will not be there on opening day. You will, though. So what are you shooting for first? Or do we have an idea of what our first food review would be?
I got to decide. I mean, it's probably got to be one of these new T-Mobile Park foods that they're unveiling. I guess the other thing I was thinking about too is am I going to do a food review on opening day? I was hoping to, hopefully talk to some fans on opening day and get some interviews for some content in that way. But let me put it like this. Within the first weekend of games, I will do a food review. And what that first food review is, I mean, that Ballard pizza looks pretty good, although that might be up your alley as somebody who actually grew up in the city of Ballard or neighborhood of Ballard, however it's classified. The calzone, it's called Cal, C-A-L, and then zone, but it's a calzone. I mean, that looked pretty good. I'm going to have to weigh my options because, I want the first food review to be something interesting. It can't just be, I don't know, like a plain hot dog or something. I hope it's something good.
How about the crickets?
So, I had one of those once, never again. My dad was so insistent on trying them when they unveiled them, and I think it was 2019. We both had one. He kind of talked me into it, even though I had refused for like an hour and a half. I had one, and we were both like, "This is the worst thing I've ever tasted."
Did you get a leg stuck in your teeth?
I don't know if I got a leg stuck in my teeth. Just in general, it was terrible. Like I know they tried to have it be this whole thing in their signature dish, but it's what it sounds like. You're eating bugs. Like, it wasn't good.
But from a marketing perspective, genius, because everyone wanted to go eat bugs at a ballpark, which you can't do anywhere else.
That is true. So I think our first food review is going to be something better than the grasshoppers. But yeah, we're going to do a bunch of fun stuff throughout the season. And also, not that I really expect people at all to recognize who we are, but if somehow you're at a Mariners game and you recognize either one of our faces, stop and say, hey. I mean, my whole thing with this is I want to connect with as many Mariner fans as possible. And, I love talking to Mariner fans, and I know there's a whole community of them out there. So, feel free to stop us down or flag us down if you ever see us walking along the concourse at T-Mobile Park or anything like that. So, yeah, I mean, that was a little spiel I just wanted to give on this podcast because, it has been fun so far. It's become a major passion of ours, and I think it's going to keep going. So I'm looking forward to seeing where it can go. But with that, And for the final time this offseason, that'll just about wrap up this edition of the Marine Layer podcast. And you guys know by now, you want to listen to the full form podcast, you can do so on Apple, Spotify, Google, and Amazon. Full video podcast is on YouTube. If you want to follow us on social media, which one more time, you're going to want to do, especially when the season starts, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube Shorts, @Marine Layer Pod. For TJ Mathewson, this is Lyle Goldstein. As always, we thank you guys for tuning in. We'll talk to you next week.